And good day. Thank you for joining us. I am Tamara Scott. You are watching, listening, however you may be following along, perhaps live on webcast1live.com. Webcast1, one is spelled out, O-N-E, webcast1live.com. 10 a.m. Central every Wednesday, except next Wednesday. Will we play the show? We're going to pre-tape next Wednesday. So will we play it again at 10? Can they tune in? All right. Next Wednesday, I am in D.C., and so we'll have to pre-tape a little bit. And then if you want to get an archive of one of our past shows, we have so many great guests who have joined us. I am so honored, so humbled by the number and the caliber of guests that are willing to come on and talk to us, whether it's Common Core, whether it's religious freedom, religious liberty, whether it's Second Amendment, whatever it may be. If God expects you to live through it, He's directed you how to do it. And we talk about anything and everything on this show. And so if you want to see one of the archives, you can go to Tamara Scott Live on YouTube. And they're there. We don't make it difficult. We are now working on a website because some of you are asking, and I appreciate that very much. I've put it off as long as I possibly can. And Ryan, my faithful producer who does such a great job, is helping me, pushing me, prodding me along. And so we are getting that done. We'll get that to you in the future. And we also need to thank our sponsors. Crave, Christians for America. We thank them for coming along with us and just making it possible for us to bring the show to you, helping us with things along the way, and in the encouragement and the prayer as much as anything. So we thank our friends at christiansforamerica.com. And if you want to find out more about them, go to the website. They're doing good work helping people break lifestyle habits that are not healthy, that are debilitating, and giving them freedom, just absolute deliverance and freedom in living a bondage-free lifestyle. And so we're very thankful for them and Danny Van Gundy and the work that they are doing. All right, we're going to move forward. We've got a great show for you today. Deb Bowen is joining me. If you're not familiar with that name, Bowen, Deb Bowen, write it somewhere on a notepad, because I hope you're going to be hearing a lot more from her. She came up with a really neat idea. They say history that a country that doesn't know its history is doomed to repeat it. And she's got a wonderful way of helping our younger generation hear, learn, listen and learn from our older generation, and then write it out in a way that the middle generation that might otherwise disregard it or even criticize it can't. They have to listen to what the kids have said, what the kids have written. And it's a really great way she's done that. It's called A Book by Me. You can go to her website, abookbyme.com. We're talking to Deb. And then later in this show, Barry Snell is joining us. Barry is with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. We talked to them a couple weeks ago about a bill at the State House. And I will update you, too, as what's happening at our State House. We've got a lot of things you need to be dealing with. The bully bill, the anti-bully bill still needs your help. 515-281-3221, 515-281-3221. Call your legislators in the House, every House member, and tell them, no. Quit giving away my parental authority. Quit bypassing, usurping me as a parent, because that's what this bill does. Quit expanding government by saying that teachers now have authority and can discipline over things that happen outside school activities, off school property. And they encourage teachers to now stalk students online. And here's what we're not realizing is that we see it more and more. Sometimes the teachers are the ones who are the danger to the student. And if you put this bill in motion, you've just given them full reign online to stalk these kids, to discipline them, to call them in, to do whatever outside school premises, and now to bypass parents. So the one who is the predator could be harassing your student, bullying your student over whatever beliefs, values, whatever. We have headline after headline of sexual molestation from teachers to students, and saying we're not going to tell the parents because they won't respond well, and making up whatever reason. This is riddled with, it will be ripe for court cases. This bill is unconstitutional, asking for student cell phones to be searched, student electronics to be searched. They're minors, but they still have a Fourth Amendment search and seizure right protection. So all kinds of issues with this bill. All right. We're going to go to Deb Bowen. She's on the line. I'm thrilled to have her here. Deb, thank you for joining me today.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it so much. And Ryan, I don't know if you've got that where you can put one of those books up front. Deb, I don't know if you're watching somewhere online where you can see what we're talking about, but I'm looking at your book, We Are One, the miraculous story of Inga and the child survivor of the Holocaust in her doll, The War and the Boy, and then The Singer and To Survivor is one of the other ones we have on the screen. And then we've got a PDF of a book you gave us. What was that book? Do you remember which one you sent us?
It may have been a black and white that the teachers could just print off. Was that it?
I'm opening it right now. I will open it right now. A Safe Home, a story of Jewish children, a home in Otwock, Poland, which, I will so enjoy looking through that because I had just been to Poland last fall.
I know, it's a fabulous story. All the stories are fabulous. If you'd like me to start from the beginning, that's probably the best place.
Well, let's go through. First off, I'm so glad that I got to meet you a couple weeks ago, and I'm looking forward. I don't know if you know, Mike Wolnerman may have his father come in and talk to us next week if things can work out. One of the Holocaust survivors that you wrote about will be our guest next week. Deb, what gave you this idea, first of all?
Well, it started when I took my daughter 13 years ago to Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance. She wanted to go. It was a classroom extra credit project. So I took her. So as Christians, we were in the car on our way, and I talked to her about Jesus worshiping in the Jewish temple, and Jesus is a Jew. And we just discussed things like that. And we got there not really knowing what to expect. And in our community, it's a very interfaith service, so there were many Christians there, many Jewish people, and even some of our Muslim community. So that's not typical, but that's the way we do it. And the interesting thing was, the thing I was unaware of was there were about 12 Jewish Holocaust survivors who lived right here in the Quad Cities at that time. And they were lined up ready to light candles in remembrance as the program started, and I was reading their bios, and I noticed that there were 3 Esthers right here in our area, and that just blessed my heart. And I met them and got to know them, and I didn't want their stories to die with them. So that's how A Book by Me started. I introduced them to children. Children wrote and illustrated their stories. So, and now we fast forward to today, and there's been 80-some stories written and illustrated by kids, for kids, to put in schools and to use for the next generation. We just have a short window of opportunity to meet people like Mr. Wolnerman. So it's very exciting to see kids going above and beyond their normal schoolwork and doing this activity that means so much. It really does, to have these stories documented. So David Wolnerman is actually the second Des Moines survivor that we have worked with at The Book by Me. 2 girls from Des Moines have written and illustrated his story. Both are Jewish. It's an amazing story. His story, he was taken to the camps and passed through many camps, as did many of the Jewish prisoners. And he actually met Dr. Mengele. Met is a strong word. He was, taken through that test every morning, whether to go to the right or to the left, either to death or to work. And he passed that test every single morning of his life in Auschwitz concentration camp. And after the war, after he survived, he was in a displaced person camp, and he got to actually meet General Eisenhower. Came on a Jewish holiday. He came to encourage them that they would have a better life one day. So he saw the most evil face of the Holocaust, and he thinks the face of hope, which was our commanding general. So what an amazing story for young readers all across Iowa, and his book will be in schools all across Iowa very soon.
And so for our listeners and our viewers, if you can see, I'm going to show you right now on screen, The Walk with Esther. This is a book that actually has all of the stories together. Am I correct in that?
Well, not all of the stories,
all of
but
them?
many, many stories. It's the stories behind the stories, how the children were impacted by this writing project, by knowing someone from the World War II generation. And they're in awe right when they meet their subject, but after the subject passes away, I think they understand what they've done, that they've preserved something that's very, very powerful.
Do you Are all of the students that you have write about them, are they all Jewish students, or are they all students of all faiths, all beliefs, all ethnic
Students of all
races?
faiths, predominantly Christian kids, but also we've had some Muslim young authors who are Muslims who very much, most of them are from predominantly Muslim countries. I work with high school age foreign exchange students, and I have access to them all year long, and we talk about things like this, and they are very offended that their home country does not teach this in their schools, and they think very much that people should understand it, and then they'll understand better the relationship between Israel and the Jews, and the Jews do have a right to exist, that they have been mistreated for centuries, thousands of years.
Having been able to visit Auschwitz and Birkenau last fall, Deb, it was an experience I never dreamt I would ever get to participate. And I saw the photo. If it was Dr. Mengele that you're talking about, I'm not sure, but I saw the photo of the doctor pointing one direction or another that quickly. That quickly, your life was ended, or you might be allowed to survive, but survival was not thriving. It was merely, barely surviving. No shoes often, or a very lightweight shoe in a very cold, cold environment. Restrooms were not something that you had available. Toilet paper certainly wasn't provided. People slept 10 in a bunk just to stay warm. Imagine the conditions, just a horrible existence. And I will look forward to meeting Mr. Wilnerman. But Deb, I'm so thankful to you for making these experiences available to the rest of us. And by doing it with children, I just commend you because, as I said earlier, if an adult writes a book, we feel free to criticize it, ignore it, whatever. But if a child does it, it's a little more difficult for us to take on the work of a child in a negative manner. And the kids don't have the agenda that adults do. They simply tell a story. They are an open slate, and they write out what they have.
That's right. That's right. And they do a beautiful job. You've seen a few samples. They do a beautiful job in their storytelling and in their artwork. I think the artwork is so compelling. I think the subject is so difficult to digest for all of us, and almost impossible to understand. But the artwork brings it to life and makes it easier to cope with.
In some of your books, I just flipped through page 48 on that larger book, and I see the Auschwitz gate. And it makes me flinch. Just seeing it makes me flinch after having been there. I can't imagine someone who actually survived it, what they must see, what they must feel. And Deb, it breaks my heart because we have so forgotten it. I've interviewed several World War II soldiers, and, for decades we didn't talk about what they saw. It was so horrific. We just simply didn't talk about what they saw.
Right.
And so we're at a stage where we realize how important it is with the honor flights. We're now listening to them, but we're losing them so quickly, just as we're losing the Holocaust survivors, I would assume.
Right. That's absolutely right. The soldiers were a little bit older, not much, but a little bit, and most of the survivors I know were young children. And there are many who still go on and speak. It is my heart's desire next fall to have 3 Holocaust education conferences across the state of Iowa, so your listeners can pray about that. And if anybody could help me with that in any way, they could definitely find me on my website, abookbyme.com. I think it's just so important for educators to actually hear a survivor speak. Person.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and I had not realized that was one of your dreams. Let's talk. And yes, certainly our viewers and our listeners, please do be praying about that. And if you're interested, your website is abookbyme.com, abookbyme.com.
Right.
And also you can, the Facebook page, Truth for Our Time. Facebook page, Truth for Our Time is the page that I've used for radio shows for years, and I just haven't ever gotten rid of that page, Truth for Our Time. So go there and inquire, message me, however you want to do it. Tamara Scott on Facebook as well. But let's talk about this because you're right. This does need to happen. It absolutely needs to happen. And you also need help getting these books into the libraries, in the schools. These are great books.
That's right. It needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. It's kind of one of those things, if not now, then when? So my goal is to get books in schools across Iowa, in the public libraries and in the schools through the AEA. So we are on target for that. 2 of them will go in the next 2 weeks. So there'll be 2 book titles in the AEAs across the state, and then they'll go into the libraries probably over the summer. But it's so important that the kids understand the individuality of these people's stories. You know, it's so easy to read a chapter in your history book and not really think about how it affected the lives of the people. But when they read one of these children's books, they understand how horrific it was, not just for the Jewish survivors, but also for our World War II soldiers. They were in no way, shape, or form ready to see what they saw in those concentration camps either. So it's just something that we need to get a grasp on and have better understanding of. And I think that makes a more compassionate young person after they've read 1 or 2 of these books. So
absolutely.
It is important that they understand the stories of Iowa, and there are some amazing stories. A gentleman from Makokata, Iowa, shot the lock off of one of the gates of Dachau. Anne Frank had a pen pal in Danville, Illinois, or Iowa. There's so many amazing stories, and we just need to get them into the hands of young readers. So that is one thing that I'm doing. I'm approaching potential donors for that right now. So prayers for success there, please. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the next important thing is to have the teachers understand the importance of it by introducing them to a survivor. So my plan is to have Teachers Institutes in 3 key cities in Iowa and invite the teachers and also give them a reward if they bring a star student. And that student would hopefully go back into their community and find the World War II soldiers who are still alive. The stories of righteous people in Davenport, Iowa, I found 2 men. One skied Jewish people over the mountains from Norway into Sweden. He worked with the Norwegian Underground. So he skied them to safety. Another gentleman, his family hid a Jewish family of 4 in their barn. And he was 6 years old, and he was expected to take the food back and forth because he was outside playing, and they felt that would be less conspicuous. So there are these people who did these amazing, righteous things, and then they immigrated to America as well, and they've never told their stories. It's up to us to find them. It's like panning for gold almost. Find those stories and document those stories so that the next generation understands what happened during World War II.
If someone doesn't have the internet, I guess it's very difficult for them to listen to this show other than a podcast. Somebody might be downloading or if they hear about you. But if they know someone and they want to call you and tell you about a survivor or a soldier, is there a phone number they can use?
It's 309-582-8888.
309-582-8888?
Yes.
And also, maybe money isn't your thing. You maybe don't have money just to give, but you might know of somebody else who can. Or maybe you know a path to get these in the libraries, the public school libraries, the public libraries. These are great books that they're so easy to read. What about church libraries?
Oh, I think they would be an amazing addition to church libraries. And some churches have bought them. When I come and speak, they'll buy them for their libraries. So that's happening as well.
And so if I wanted to buy a pack, do you sell a pack of the whole, everything you've done so far?
We do not have them packaged. You can find what we do have on the website, bookbyme.com. There is one bundle on there that's a reduced price. So go check it out. I hope that you do.
And so when I'm looking through this book, again, I want to illustrate. It's an easy read. Many of us are busy. We don't have time. It's an elementary book, so it's an easy, quick read for adults. It's a great way for adults to get information and share. But, for your kids, your grandkids. But I really like the fact that the kids did these, and there's no agenda. It's just the story.
That's right. There's no agenda. And I learn from every single one. Every time I sit down to listen to a story with a young author, I learned something from that person every time. I was just out in L.A. recently, and I sat down with a survivor, and I hadn't thought of this, but the Jews don't believe in cremation. It's against their law. And she said, to have my family go into the ovens was not only not only so tragically heartbreaking, but also against the law. I hadn't even thought of that ever in all the years that I've worked with that. That thought had not occurred to me.
I hadn't either. The students, I can't imagine the change on the life of the students. Have you had some of the students who have written these stories a few years back come to you later and talk about
Absolutely. The soldier in Makokata passed away last summer, and I went to the funeral with his young author, and she just poured her heart out to me. That this project had changed her life, the way she looked at things. She really, really wants to help me take it to new heights. And, she said, I feel myself, I have become so much more compassionate and so much more willing and ready to listen to people's stories. We live a fast-paced world, that we all do. The kids do, and we certainly do as well. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give is to sit down and listen to someone and what they've been through.
I agree. And you talk about that fast-paced world and the screen time that our kids get. These photos drawn by children, colored by children, some of them really pretty good. But I think that will hold children's attention as well. In the back of each book, I really like what you've done. I'm holding it up for the camera for those who are watching online. The learning station, where you take them through the timeline of things happening, but you customize each one to the story of the book, the subject of the book, correct?
Correct. That's an important piece. Teachers are really busy in the classroom, and they would not have time to do this themselves. So it's very important that we give them the tools for their toolbox to take it to the next level after it's used as a read aloud. So
if you're hearing this and you know a school board member, you know a faculty member, somebody who works or works in a library, I would ask you, these are worthy. These are worthy treasures. These are gems in themselves to have available. This is a, I hate to say it, but a perishing generation.
Yes.
And we need to have these stories told in the manner in which they're told is so simple, so sweet, and so honest. And Mary Jean Eisenhower gives you some really high comments on the back of this particular book. I started to read the materials and stories, and I could not put them down. It was so powerful to read both the students' interpretation as well as the direct stories from the survivors themselves. I have many times researched and studied the Holocaust, but these stories bring the experience to life.
What an honor it was to meet her, and that's actually in my book, A Walk with Esther, that story of just sitting down with her and listening to her things that she told me about her granddad. It was just a very powerful day for me, and I'm so thankful that I got that opportunity.
You were an educator yourself, correct?
No, I was not, actually.
Why did I think you were a teacher?
No, I worked in a school district. I had a job, and then I became a stay-home mom when our kids were little. Okay. And then slowly as they got up into the school age, I began to work in our school district, but I did not work in the classroom. Okay. I worked actually with the GED program. So I worked with the kids trying to get them a little bit more excited about school than their parents were. And that's where I got the idea. Actually, I wanted each one of them to become a young author. And we got their books self-published, and we put them in the local library, and they were they were young, so it was a humble beginning for them, let's say it that way. And that's really how the idea about a book by me came along. When I met the three Esthers, I looked back upon that effort, and I thought, this has so much greater purpose, right?
It does. It absolutely does. And of course, in the book, you talk about, how you were assigned, Doug, the college student, was assigned to you, and how you came up with the logo. I mean, this really was just, what would we say, an authentic, a genuine grassroots or homegrown.
It is, absolutely. I had no more intentions of becoming a publisher than the Man in the Moon. That's not what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was teaching Bible studies at my church. I was, a soccer mom. I was just out there doing all the things we do when we have a young family. And, I just it still amazes me how one night changed my life. Seeing these survivors that were local, hearing our survivor who was the speaker, she was from Texas, and hearing her talk about, I had no underpants for those 3 years I was in the camp. I had no socks. I had no, a thin dress. We were always cold. I mean, this morning where I am, it's a damp morning, and it's so hard to get warm when you've gotten a chill. Can you imagine living like that for years?
No.
No green grass. There was not one blade of green grass in the camps.
The buildings were so close together, and Auschwitz was actually. It irritated me how pretty it looked now with the trees and the green. I know it didn't look like that then with that many people walking through. It had to be muddy. It had to be dirty. I know it didn't look like that then. But Birkenau, you could see where they had just... still it changes my life each day. When I do things now, it goes through the filter of what I saw, what I learned at Birkenau. Yes. I fell recently, and when I fell, it was such a way... I don't have balance, I get that, but God gave me good bounce, so I can usually recover fairly quickly.
Yes.
And this particular fall, I had to regroup before I could even figure out which leg to move, which limb was not broken.
Wow.
I wasn't sure, right? So while I'm sitting there gathering myself, figuring out what might or might not move, I thought, if I were in that camp, I would be shot. They explained that. If you fell, they didn't wait for you to recover. They didn't wait for you to get back up. They just shot you while you were down.
Yes.
That quickly, my life could have been snuffed out.
Yes. Very cheap life.
You talk about how your life was changed one night.
Yes.
Imagine these lives changed.
Yes. You cannot believe how many survivors have actually reached up and held my face in their hand and say, thank you for caring. They didn't talk about it for years. You're absolutely right. When you were doing the intro, they didn't talk about it for years. But so many of them, they're not professional speakers. They don't have a platform. It's hard for even them to imagine themselves on a stage.
Right.
And if they're able to come into a classroom, we definitely want to do that. But if they're not, we will bring one child to them, which is very comfortable, to sit around a table with one child and show your what photos you might have and things like that. It's very, very comfortable for them. So whatever way we can get them to meet with the child, we do it. I mean, we just make it right for them. We want them to feel comfortable. It's very humbling when you have someone tell you, thank you for giving me a voice, because they know their stories are going to die without anyone remembering if we don't do something.
What's so very fitting, after being treated as if their lives had no value whatsoever, to been given this value to their life now.
Right.
Deb, I thank you for doing that, and my prayer is that God will honor you and will bless you in this work for doing that. When you've talked to these survivors, has there been like a particularly moving story? I mean, they're all gripping. They just have to be. But is there a story that stands out?
Well, just recently I was in Los Angeles. I mentioned that, and actually a family of survivors saved by Oskar Schindler came to Des Moines after the war. I don't know if you know that. They lived in the Des Moines area. I think they came like a year or two after the war ended. So it was a husband, a wife, and their young daughter. And now she lives in Los Angeles. So I was able to meet her when I was out there, and we sat down and talked. And she had just come back from the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. She was there with Steven Spielberg. She was actually on the movie set several times when they made Schindler's List, just as a fact checker. And several of the Schindler Jews were on the set. So she definitely has that relationship. But to sit down with her at her home and have brunch and have her tell me the stories that we all know, because especially if you've seen Schindler's List, it was just incredible. And then to talk about the 70th anniversary, and she had taken her grandson with her. He's actually a composer, and he wrote a song for that event, and Steven Spielberg allowed him to play that song.
Incredible.
And just the how it had come full circle. Here she came with the grandson that Adolf Hitler didn't believe, never wanted to exist. And he played music, beautiful music, for all the survivors there. That was amazing. It was surreal to sit and listen to her.
I find myself just listening to you. I'm taken by just hearing the stories through you. You will be in Des Moines next week. You'll be here April 16th to tell the story of David Wolnerman, who you've now written a book about, or you've had a student write a book about, correct?
Yes. Yes. The book is called A Lucky Lie. David told Dr. Mengele that he was 18 because he saw the younger kids going to the left into the line that was going to the crematorium. So he thought he better move his age up a bit. So he told a fib, and it turned out to be what saved his life. So, yes, I will be in Des Moines on the 16th, and if anyone wants to meet with me or talk to me, I should have some extra time. So you can go on my website, bookbyme.com, and there's a place in there that you could write me a note.
Well, I'm so thankful you took time to join us today. I'm very, very thankful for the work that you're doing, the legacy that you're passing forward, the beauty of having the young students write it. You're teaching several generations at once because parents and grandparents will listen to what their children are writing.
Right.
Adults will not criticize the work of a youngster like they would someone else. So I'm so great. It was just brilliant. It was just, I would say, divinely inspired the way you've done this.
You.
And I'm so thankful for it. Again, abookbyme.com is the website, Deb Bowen, Bowen. Deb, is there anything you'd like to leave with our listeners and viewers before you take off and depart from us on this show?
You know, I just, as I hear stories more and more, all the time, I just think how easy it is for all of us to be kind, be more kind. To people who don't believe the same way we do, I think we can all just take a lesson from these horrible stories and just go that extra mile and be kind.
Perfect, and that's a segue right into my next segment. When we come back after the break, we'll be talking about some of the things happening at the state capitol, different people giving prayers, the Wiccan, the Imam, there this week, and we'll talk about that very thing, walking in love but standing firm in truth. Thank you, Deb Bowen, so much for taking time to join me today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We'll be right back after a message from our sponsors. Stay tuned.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast